Okay, so I'm here today to give a talk about money and our monetary system. What I want to do is talk first of all about how money is created. There are three different kinds of money. I'll briefly talk about each one, but I want to particularly focus on commercial bank money because that is over 97% now of the money supply is commercial bank money, and that's at the hub of our monetary system. So I'm going to explain where money comes from, how it works, and how it is used to transfer wealth from the poor inevitably up to the rich. How it inevitably creates unpayable debt, which we all then have to pay off using our labour, using our work, using our love and our creativity, basically giving our lives away to the man. So first of all, what is money? Like I said, there are three different kinds of money. The first kind of money is government money. This is the cash, this is the notes and coins that we're all familiar with in circulation, what we all think of as money. But actually, this only accounts for about 2.5% of our total money supply. So government money is printed at the Royal Mint, and then those notes and coins are sold through the commercial banks and circulated through the commercial banks. It's important to understand that government money is issued, it's paid for, and it goes into circulation. It is not gathering interest, it is not owed to anyone by anyone. This is debt-free money, interest-free money. But like I said, this is only about 2.5% of the total money in circulation. The other 97% is commercial bank money. I'm going to talk a lot about that in just a minute, but just before I do, let me talk about the third kind of money. Third kind of money is central bank money. We don't ever see that. Central bank money is held in the Bank of England and is used at the end of each trading day to settle accounts between the commercial banks. Commercial bank money, this is where I want to spend most of my time because this is the really evil part of our monetary system. If you have a banking license, you are granted the permission to create money in response to a loan. So a customer goes into a bank and they want to borrow £100,000 to buy a house. The bank, in response to the need for that loan, creates out of thin air 100,000 brand new shiny pounds. Not notes and coins, it is just a bookkeeping entry. They tap £100,000 credit into your bank account, and at the same time you now have created a debt with the bank. You owe the bank £100,000 plus the interest over the period of time of that loan. Under our commercial banking system, money and debt are in fact the same thing. Money given to you by the bank is equal to debt owed by you to the bank. So money equals debt. It's a really important concept to remember here. I'm going to come back to this theme again and again during the course of my talk. So you go to the bank and you borrow £100,000. I will represent that £100,000 as that block. You now owe the bank £100,000. They have a debt owed to them for £100,000. Now, believe it or not, once the bank lends you that money, which remember they never had in the first place, they've created it out of thin air, that debt now becomes an asset of the bank, believe it or not. Yeah, they are owed this money, therefore it becomes an asset of the bank. Now, they've lent you that money, and so on top of that loan, you're going to have to pay interest. So the debt is bigger than the amount of money lent to you, right? This is the amount of money in circulation, this is the debt owed. Another person comes along, borrows £100,000. Another £100,000 owed to the bank, plus the interest on that £100,000. You can see that as more and more money is lent, the difference between the money lent and the money owed is forever getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You can see on these two bars, there's now £300,000 in circulation, but there's £400,000 or £500,000 owed to the banks, right? Now, this is one of the crucial things to understand about our monetary system, is that there is never enough money in circulation to cover all of the debt which is owed. As at 2010, this will blow your mind, and if it doesn't blow your mind, you're not fully understanding it. Sorry, I don't mean that to sound patronising, but that's the case. As of 2010, around the world, total global debt was $180 trillion. That was in 2010. In 2010, the global money supply was about $70 trillion. So as at 2010, this problem here, because there's interest due on debt, this problem here of debt being bigger than money in circulation has got to the point where there was in 2010 $110 trillion around the world of debt which simply cannot be paid because the money to pay it does not exist, right? It's like a game of musical chairs. You've got 3 chairs in the game, but you've got 5 players in the game. 2 of those players, when the music stops, 2 of those players are going to be left out in the cold. In other words, defaults, bankruptcies, people not being able to pay their mortgages, businesses not being able to service their debts, this kind of thing is inevitable because the interest payments soon get to a point, you know, you've got so much more debt than money in circulation that some people must default on their debt. Now what happens when a debt is paid? When a debt is paid, money and debt, because they're opposites of each other, when you pay off your debt, the money is destroyed. The money and the debt cancel each other out. When debt is paid, money is destroyed. So all this nonsense they talk, you hear on the news, government representatives, the Chancellor of the Exchequer even, doesn't understand this basic point. It is impossible to reduce the deficit. It is impossible to pay off the national debt because the money to do so simply doesn't exist. The only way to keep up with the ever-expanding interest payments on this unpayable debt is to create ever more and ever more money. And of course, as you create more money, you're creating more debt alongside that money. You can never, ever, ever get ahead of the curve. And I don't mean it's impossible in the sense of, you know, it's not actually impossible. I mean the actual dictionary definition of impossible. It simply cannot be done. Right, so that's consequence number 1, is debt slavery. Consequence number 1 is unpayable debt being built up in the economy. Consequence number 2 is real wealth in the economy always being transferred from poor people to rich people, from ordinary working folk to the banks. How do they... Right, okay, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about solutions at the end, if you don't mind. But you may know this. I think there are an awful lot of people out there that don't. So I'm trying to elucidate the problems first, and then I'll talk about some of the possible, because there are a wide range of possible solutions. Like, for example, universal basic income, removing the need for giving your labour to sustain the basic essentials of life. As I say, there are lots of ideas out there. None of them are perfect. They all have their good points and their bad points. I'm just saying that until lots of people are aware of the problems and understand the need to find solutions and the... Sorry, say again? For thousands of years, I know, but what's different between now and any time in history is our ability to communicate with each other on a large scale anywhere in the world instantly via the internet. We've never had the internet before, right? That's what's different now, and that's what gives me possible hope for the future, is that we can find ways to collaborate with each other on a large scale, independently of the banks and the governments, and hopefully make them irrelevant and obsolete. Look, do you know what? I realise it seems like a bit of a pipe dream, but if you can't even hope for it, if you can't even conceive it, what hope do you ever have of bringing it into reality? Do you know what I mean? So can we try and be a bit upbeat and a bit hopeful rather than negative, right? Because if we say there's nothing we can do, then for sure we're never going to do anything, you know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm saying? Right, anyway, so next thing is the transference of wealth from the poor to the rich, inevitably, because think about it, who has money to lend? Rich people. Who needs money? Poor people. So what ends up happening is poor people pay interest to rich people, making poor people ever poorer and rich people ever richer. Just a little stat to reinforce that idea about transferring real wealth from the poor to the rich. In 1960, the top 20% of people had 30 times the wealth of the bottom 20%. In 1998, that ratio had increased to 74 times. In the US in 2007, the top 1% owned 42% of the nation's wealth. The bottom 80% between them owned 7%. Just a couple of months ago in the news, there was a stat about the richest 8 people in the world now have as much wealth as the poorest 50% of the people in the world. So this gap, this inequality gap between rich and poor has been growing larger and larger, and this is inevitable. This is not about greedy people taking more for themselves. This is systemic. It is unavoidable under this monetary system for this wealth gap between rich and poor to increase forever. It simply can't be stopped. third consequence of our monetary system, because we're constantly creating new money and bringing it into circulation, all of that new money has to go somewhere, right? It has to be spent somewhere. And so, two things about this. Firstly, inflation. We tend to think about inflation as being about rising prices. It's not. That is a symptom, not a cause of inflation. The reason for inflation is the constantly expanding number of pounds in circulation. If you're increasing the number of pounds flowing around, then you've got to do one of two things. You either have to increase the number of goods and services available in the economy, or the price of those existing goods and services has to go up to reflect the extra money that's circulating about. This is called inflation. When prices go up, this is called inflation, but it's a consequence of an expanding money supply, not a consequence of rising prices. The other thing, and more importantly, if a bank is deciding where they're going to lend their money, they decide where money is being spent in society. They do not lend money on high risk ventures. They will lend money on sure things. And so what's happened? Quantitative easing and the bailout money to the banks, where did that go? Did that go on infrastructure development? Did that go on transportation, lowering transportation costs or energy costs for people? Did that go on building more social housing? It didn't go on any of those things. It went on reinflating the housing market, so we've got another housing bubble that we're now in the midst of. It went to inflating the stock market to record highs, and it went to speculating on the foreign exchange markets. Do you know over $4 trillion is traded every day on the foreign exchange markets? Global GDP is about $70 trillion. $4 trillion is traded every day on the foreign exchange markets. It's nonsense. It's got completely out of control. All of that money floating around is being used to service rich people. It's not going to us down here. Right, forgive me, just referring to notes again. I have done this talk before, believe it or not, but for some reason my mind is blanking today. Sorry, say again? Yeah. Right, and then finally is the concept of debt slavery, and this is really what I'm all about. Is we are slaves to the banks. Yeah, basically every minute that you work, you are working primarily for the banks. You get to keep very, very little of your own. Bearing in mind that the banks can make money out of thin air, right? So they are taking no risk. When they lend you £100,000 to buy your house, they are taking no risk. They're creating money out of thin air. They didn't own the money as property in the first place, right? If you default on your mortgage, they take the house. They take the whole house, including any deposit you paid, including any increase in value of the house, including any mortgage payments you've made so far. They take the whole house from you, not only the unpaid portion of it. They are taking no risk here. So, what you do, you go and borrow money from the bank, but you have to repay that money with real labour, with real time, with real love. They are essentially stealing your life away from you, turning it into a debt, and then making you spend your life repaying that debt to them. Debt-based currency is simply a path to slavery. I don't just mean on an individual level. This happens at a governmental level as well. We've now got into a situation where bank assets are some 550% of national GDP every year. Up until the 1960s, 1970s, it's been pretty steady at about 40%. The banks now have 550% of the bank's assets are 550% of global GDP. What this means, and most of those assets are government bonds. What you've got is commercial banks creating money out of thin air, lending them back to national governments at interest in exchange for government bonds. Those bonds carry interest. How does the government pay the interest on those bonds? Out of our taxes. Did you know, and again this will blow your mind, did you know that 90% of the income tax revenue collected by the Treasury goes to paying interest on the national debt? It does not go towards building roads and schools and hospitals and improving the energy infrastructure. 90%, not of all tax revenue, I'm talking about income tax revenue, 90% of income tax revenue goes towards paying interest on loans from commercial banks. The government is paying interest to commercial banks for money for which it is the sole issuing authority. Remember, the Bank of England is the only one that has the authority to issue money, and it has the authority to issue commercial banks to issue money. But the commercial banks are creating funny money out of thin air, lending it back to governments in hundreds of billions, in trillions of dollars, and governments are now paying interest on those debts through the taxation of its citizens. The IRS, the Federal Reserve was set up in 1913. The IRS, the American Inland Revenue Service, was also set up in 1913, right? So as the Federal Reserve was set up to lend money to government, the government also set up a tax collection service so it could start making interest payments on the loans that it was taking from a private bank. The Federal Reserve is not a federal agency, it is a private bank, despite what they call themselves.
And the Bank of England is a private bank as well. It's not the Bank of England, it's not owned by the English people, it's a private
Correct.
company.
It's owned by a cabal of private bankers. So what this means is, because banks are holding hundreds of billions or even trillions of government debt, they can now dictate terms to government. They can tell government what they can and can't spend money on. They can tell government that they have to enter into cost-cutting measures, right? They can tell government what they can and can't do for their citizens. So actually, our governments are no longer running things. Even if their desire to make life better for their citizens were sincere, and they're not, but even if they had a sincere desire to make life better for their citizens, they simply cannot do so, because they are in hock up to their eyeballs to the banks. Right, so the question now becomes, as the gentleman over here was asking before, firstly, why is it like this? How has it come about? Well, it's very simple. Money men have always pulled the strings for thousands of years, yeah? The pharaohs, the kings and queens, the emperors, the conquerors, you know, these are the people at the very, very top have always been those that have pulled the strings. This is nothing new. And so our modern banking system, our modern monetary system is simply a very clever, very sophisticated way of keeping the population enslaved without them even knowing that they're enslaved. As Johann Wolfgang von Goethe wrote, none are so hopelessly enslaved as those who falsely believe themselves to be free. And sadly, that is how I see what we are, unfortunately, unwitting slaves to the man. Right, so solutions. What can we do about it? Unfortunately, until many, many, many more people see that there is a problem, there is not going to be any serious search for solutions. But there are people out there who have been trying very, very hard to come up with alternatives. Sorry, did you have something? Yeah, go ahead.
Who will control all the reasons?
It's a collective thing, right? So ultimately, I guess it's a computer, kind of, that's allocating things, but it's doing so according to an agreed scheme as to what's fair and what's equitable and what's needed, you know what I mean? And so a large part of a resource-based economy is based on shared access to things. Not everybody has a car, right? You don't need to have a car. 80% of the time, 90% of the car, your car is just parked there, right? So you don't need to own a car. What you need is access to a car when you need one, right? And so, again, with modern systems, it's not difficult to set up an Uber-style system where you ring up, a car comes, picks you up, takes you to where you're going, goes on, picks up the next person. Nobody needs to own a car anymore, you know what I mean? And this can apply to many, many, many things. This concept of shared ownership.
You only need a car or transportation if you're in the wrong place. If you're in the place where everything you need is.
Yeah, that's a good example. That's a good example of decreasing the scarcity of resources.
Correct, exactly
But
right.
in the end, someone has to control or has to say who will be able to create that.
Yeah, do you mind? Sorry to interrupt you, but you're absolutely, and this is the number one criticism of the idea of a resource-based economy. Is it's still a centralised control system, right? And a resource-based economy cannot come about without us first experiencing a change in consciousness, right, where we stop seeing each other as competition and we start seeing each other as brothers and sisters, right? And until that comes about, a resource-based economy cannot happen. But for the long-term sustainable good of mankind, something along the line of resource-based economy has to be the way forward, right? Even though it's difficult to see it from where we are now. Yes, go on. Well, what we need, I mean, a resource-based economy or something like it, I really think for long-term future of mankind is where we need to end up. How we get from here to there, transitional solutions, there are... Yeah, I agree. You asked the most difficult question. And there are lots of transitional ideas out there. So moving away from it, step number one is to move away from a debt-based monetary system. Yeah, something that is not rooted in debt. Gold, Bitcoin, government-issued currency, whatever, but something which is not rooted in debt. No, I agree. To get straight from here to a resource-based economy, it's impossible. You can't do it in one step, right? There has to be a series of transitional steps. I completely agree with you, right? So step number one on this road is to get rid of debt-based currencies and replace it with currencies which are not rooted in debt, which are not controlled and issued by commercial banks, right, that are independent of all of that. For example, gold, for example, Bitcoin, right? These are outside, you can't create gold, you can't just make gold out of thin air, right? There's a finite amount of it. Same with Bitcoin. You know, that something like that is a step on the road towards the idea of a universal basic income, so that people are removed from slavery. You don't have to work to feed yourself, to house yourself, you know what I mean? That again, is a step on the road. But these are all transitions, these are all ways of getting to the final goal, which is no money, because we don't need it. We don't need it. If you have unfettered access to everything that you need and the freedom to follow your passions and do what you want to, what the hell do you need money for? Do you know what I mean? It's like a Star Trek sort of thing. What the hell do you need money for? It's not necessary. So what I said is, give me an example of what you need money for in your life. Give me an example of something you need money for. Let's say, okay, let me give you an example. Let's say that you're a business, right, and you want to build a new factory. You've got a new product, and so you need money to buy the land and build the factory and so on. But you don't need the money. What you need is the space. You need people to build the buildings. You need the material to build the buildings. That's what you need, right? You need the machines to tool the factory. You need to train the workers in how to use the machinery. This is what you need, right? Now, under our system, money is a vehicle by which you do these things, right? But you don't actually need the money. What you need is those things. And so what we need to get away is this mode of thinking where money directs everything. Because money is a fantasy. We made it up. Yeah, it's like the boogeyman, it's like the tooth fairy, it's like Santa Claus. We made it up, and we can just as easily forget about it.
If I want to build a company and I want to hire some people to build this company,
Yeah.
they need a motivation to build this for me.
I agree, but if you live in a society where everybody is motivated simply to help each other out where they can, because that's how we all live now, right? Yeah? And that's what I'm talking, that's the change of consciousness I'm talking about, right? And until we get that, we can't get rid of money. You're right. We need to change our thinking first, then we can change our systems. But that is up to every individual. I can't change your thinking, right? Every individual has to take responsibility for how they act in this world, how they treat the people around them, how they treat the planet around them. You know what I mean? Every individual person must take responsibility for that and must try in a gentle, loving way when they see other people not doing that to try and put them on the right path. You know what I mean? Not beat them into it, not shout them into it, gently, lovingly, just try and show them, because everybody has to come to it themselves. Yeah, if you try and force it on people, they will simply back away from it. You know what I mean? Yeah? And so everything is, we're all one fucking being on this planet, right? To treat each other with anything other than compassion and love and respect is stupid. It's as simple as that, right? You don't need religion to tell you that. You don't need laws to tell you that. We all know that. It's self-evident, right? It's obvious. We all know that. So let's act like that, right? Let's be like that. Every single minute in this world, let's be like that. But forget government. Solutions are not coming from the top down. Solutions are not coming that way. We have to find solutions amongst ourselves and make them irrelevant and obsolete. So stop that. Ignore them. Do your own thing. Make them irrelevant and obsolete. Let them fade away into nothingness where they belong. That's all they're interested in, is preserving their own power, right? So they are not going to provide solutions. We, the middle class in rich countries, it is up to us to save the world. No one else is going to do it. I'm telling you, I know that sounds incredibly elitist, but it is up to us, the middle and working class people in rich countries. We are the only ones who have the power to bring about real change in this world. It's up to us. By doing things like this, by going to gatherings and spreading the word of love, yeah? It's all you can do. Then they shoot me, you know what I mean? Then they shoot me.
So what? Once you're dead, you've got no more problems.
But you know what? Once you understand how rapacious and evil the system that we live in is, and how hard it is to break from, how can it not be the thing that's at the front of your mind and in the front of your heart every minute of every day, to try and change that, to try and change as many hearts and souls as you can with every waking minute? What higher purpose could there be for your living on this time, in this place? For each and every one of us who sees the problem as it is. We have to model, we have to be beacons to all of those around us. We have to model that compassion and that understanding and that love to each other.
It's all good talking about it, but what are the
Then do it. Just you. All you can do is you. Do it in your life, every minute of every day. You do it. That's all you can be responsible for, right? You can't change the world. Bobby Kennedy, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm not going to get this word for word. Bobby Kennedy said that few of us will have the ability to achieve greatness in life, but every single one of us can affect in some small way what goes on in our little world. And in the sum of all of those actions can be the doing of a generation. Yes, sorry, go on.
we can give of ourselves freely?
Correct, because it is good to do so, and it feels good to do so.
Because the only way that we can take any power away from the money system is to give of ourselves freely. The only way that you can legally not pay tax is if you don't earn money. So if you don't take part in the system at all, you give it up, you walk in and say, I'm not playing your game anymore, then the game finishes.
Stop, absolutely right. If nobody plays, the game has to stop, right? Absolutely. I have to say, this man here, respect him, he's got the balls to actually not play their game at all. He just doesn't play at all. I would love to have those kinds of balls myself, I really would.
I do play it a little.
Yeah, but way, way, way less than the rest of us, right? Yeah.
Resource space. Whose planet is it? Who does it belong to? Does it belong to man?
It doesn't belong to anyone.
Or does it belong to all of life?
We're just passing through.
It doesn't belong to anyone.
Does it belong to
Property
all
is
of
an
life?
old outdated concept.
Absolutely.
Yeah, does this planet belong to all of life? Or does it belong to man?
It doesn't even belong to all of life. It is simply a home for all of
Based
life. It
on
doesn't
the
belong
assumption
at all.
that there is property. We don't see that there is property.
So somewhere along the lines we claimed ownership over something that's not ours, and then we use those resources
Exactly right.
to control each other's minds.
That's exactly right.
So if you want to get away from the control freaks, we've got to find a way of giving it all back. So in terms of goals, we're still going to have the mind, and we're still going to have
Absolutely,
all
and
these things.
I only say it as a transition, that's all, not as a final solution. Absolutely.
If we can drop the value systems that we have completely and start valuing life above everything else, then surely our actions in supporting life should be beneficial to everyone.
I couldn't have said it any possibly better. It's exactly right. That's what I meant about the transformation in consciousness is necessary.
Do you guys know any society or place on Earth that actually does that?
There's the kibbutzim in Israel. They have a pretty egalitarian there. If you read, there's a guy called David Graeber who writes quite extensively about sort of prehistoric man. He's an anthropologist, and he writes quite extensively about ways societies were organised. And according to him, back in the hunter-gatherer days, societies were entirely egalitarian, you know what I mean? There was no hierarchical structure at all. And he also believes that the idea of barter is a myth. There was no widespread system of barter before money. Money came in one step as a way to control and organise population as nations and empires started to evolve. Money was a way of controlling your citizenry, you know what I mean?
Money was a way of understanding
That too.
societies would have benefited each other.
Armies produce nothing, right? They need to be paid instead because they produce nothing. Yeah.
We don't simply vital or viable. So vital and viable is all about life. So when we value things, we're talking about life. So there's vital, valuable, all of these are life words. We've corrupted them and we've put them into money. So money and gold we hold as vital and valuable. But they don't support life. You put shit on the floor, you put gold on the floor, watching shit, you turn it into cocktails, life will spring from it.
Nothing will happen to gold,
It's
absolutely.
inert. So we celebrate
David
things
Graeber,
that are inert.
Graeber.
And that supports life, we destroy.
Yeah, he's really good. You'll find him really
But
interesting.
change our mindset. This is
Very interesting context it provides to modern society from a long
life
time
is
ago.
more important than the value schemes that we have at the moment.
We live in a world that don't have any money.
Yeah.
It sounds really good. It seems to me like there's a little element of naivety. Like you say, with the very asking human beings should look at each other as competition. Look at nature, animals in the wild as competition.
Oh, there's this guy called.
compete with each other in the sunlight, and one tree will grow big and the other won't.
There's a guy.
In a way, don't you think we're still
There's a
The
guy
tree
called
that grows
Darwin.
best well isn't trying to be the big tree, is it? It just is what it is. No, but it just is what it. But it is what it is. It makes the best of what it has, and it is what it is. And it doesn't moan or complain about that. It's not jealous of the big tree, is it?
There was a guy called Darwin, and there was a guy called Rumble.
Just saying.
There's a guy called Darwin and a guy called Rumble. Yeah? And a guy called Rumble came up with this wonderful idea of cooperative interdependence. Now, cooperative interdependence means that my out-breath feeds the trees, their out-breath feeds me. Yeah, we've got this relationship. So I've got a relationship with the trees. The water that's in my blood is the same as the water in the rain cycle. I've got a relationship. I've got a relationship with the whole of the planet that I live on. The food that I eat is the mineral kingdom, is the land that it grows on. If I toxify and poison the whole of the planet for a short-term gain, I'm toxifying and poisoning myself. If I poison the rain, I'm poisoning the water I drink. If I poison the air that I breathe, I'm poisoning all of it. So how is it that my short-term financial gain can be worth throwing away my long-term environmental future?
Why are you competitive?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm saying.
Because you're trained from year dot to get an A, right? Get an A, do well, excel, be the best that you can be. What was
Darwin.
bullshit?
It's Darwin. Look at Rumble. Look at the fact that we're actually together. We are all, as you say, we're all one. At the moment, we're a parasitic organism that's devoiding its host planet of its ability to support life. We need to become a symbiotic life form that's supporting the life of its host planet. This is a mental health problem that we're in denial of.
But people are self-centered, aren't they? People are self-centered. They think individually. They don't think as a communal.
That's because what the system
Correct, and therein lies the real root of the
We've been
problem.
educated that way.
Yeah.
indoctrinated.
And that behaviour is rewarded at every step. Who rises up the ranks of organisations and governments and corporations? The ones, the ruthless motherfuckers who will do anything and stamp on anyone to get there, right? And so what we end up with is a world run by psychopaths and criminals, is what we end up with.
In Stone Age times, when we were all, living as, hunter-gatherers.
Utterly egalitarian.
Was it? But no, but it was one tribe fighting for dominance for the other.
No.
If there was two tribes coming in and there wasn't enough animal meat, they would kill each other.
Well,
And then, or they'd enslave the other
I
tribe.
mean, one never really knows because one wasn't there, but according to what I've read, very, very rarely, actually, real conflict is not to any... If you look in the animal, you used the animal kingdom before, yeah? What happens when two stags are facing off? They swear, they're very, very, very rare that two males, when they're fighting for dominance, actually fight. Yeah, they put up a show and they snarl and they growl and they swag their asses or whatever, but it's very rare that they actually come into physical conflict. One will usually back down, do you know what I mean? And so it's a show of strength rather than an actual battle. And it usually ends there in the animal kingdom, right?
There was a lot of trading between the tribals, and if they really had an argue between each other, then they have to kill each other, because there was no court, there was
But
nothing
again, it
like
wasn't,
that.
if I may, it wasn't really trading. It was just the sharing of a, I know how to do this, you know how to do that, let's exchange ideas.
Exactly.
But it wasn't like a trade, it was just for everyone's benefit to
Yes.
acquire new skills and new
Some
knowledge.
had this,
And
the
then
other
tribes
one
would
had that.
amalgamate because they understood on some level that this widened the gene pool as well, right? And so this made them, a more
kinda
resilient.
understood that.
Exactly,
Before we
exactly.
did the money stuff, because the money stuff we brought in so that we could have a standing army. Before we did that, the people that would be in the army would be the same people that grow the crops, that do all the other work in society. So when the two armies met, more often than not, they would send forward a champion from each side. The two people would have a fight.
Yeah.
The
They can't afford to lose the manpower.
The decision would be made by those two people fighting, and the two armies would go back to whatever it was they were doing before. Right. When we invented money, we had the ability to have an expendable force. A group of people that were there purely and simply to take life. And then the army that could just take life, and it didn't matter how many you lose because you could just buy some more, could go up against the group that had to feed themselves, had to hunt, had to gather, had to do all the other bits. So the side that had the big army that had nothing else to do could kill all of the others, take over the space and enslave the people.
And that's who now runs the world. The people that had the big armies, that's who now runs the world.
Divide and conquer.
You are talking like you want us to delete our emotions, like greedy, like
Correct.
jealous, like
No,
this
no,
is impossible
no.
because
Not
in
in
our,
our-
No, don't get rid of greed. Just instead
Transfer
of focusing your greed to in here, I'm greedy for little me. Transfer our greed to out there. I'm greedy to give. I'm greedy to care. I'm greedy to sort this problem out. It's not greed. It's where it's placed.
You turn it inside out, and greed
Placed
now becomes
in our stomach.
giving. You know
We
what
need
I
to
mean?
lift it to our heart and give, instead of being greedy to take. That's
But
all
it's
it
actually
is.
the same thing, you just do it the other way. That is, I mean, that's basically that's it.
I was thinking about the question before, when you talked about what should we do instead of money, and how do we actually get motivation to build, if you want to build a factory, why do you want to build that factory? if that factory is for your own gain, people will have to have money to be able to build it for you.
But is that
If you're going to build a factory or perhaps a hospital that will gain, that other people will gain from, then they will
happy
do it.
to help, right?
Yes, because that will be the inspiration.
And
Yes,
in a
I
money-free
think so.
society, different incentives will arise, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You'll gain status for different reasons in society, you know?
Sorry, I've got a question.
Yeah.
So I've joined in halfway through.
Yeah.
So I managed to get bits and pieces.
You were here last week, weren't you? Or 2
Yes.
weeks ago? I remember you. Yeah.
So you're saying that the money system now has clearly failed, right?
Well, no, I think it's succeeded beautifully in what it's designed to
Succeeded,
do, to enslave a population, yeah?
Yeah, okay.
It's succeeded fantastically well.
Before the money system, we had the bartering system, right?
Well, apparently not, actually.
for a small period
Money-
of time. For a small
So
period
that
of time.
clearly
After
failed.
we did hunter-gathering,
Yeah.
and once we'd broken up into tribes that were fighting each other, we did the bartering thing to be able to trade with other tribes.
Which obviously caused more problems. because
Well,
there's
Again,
negativity
it was
in that.
taking something that wasn't ours,
Yeah.
claiming it as ours, and using it to manipulate the minds of others.
Okay, but obviously we're not going back down that route.
no, the idea is to get away from trade in that sort of sense altogether, you
So
know what I mean?
system do you propose then?
Collaboration.
Collaboration.
Cooperation.
Okay.
Cooperation.
Do you think that's difficult to achieve where
I think it's impossible to achieve with our current mindset. I believe it's impossible,
And
yes.
it's impossible to achieve with money
So
as
the
well.
solution relies upon the mindset.
Correct.
The actual system
Correct.
itself.
Paying that debt. You know, most families now, you've got both people out working 50-hour weeks, paying for childcare, never get to see their kids. They're always tired when they do see their kids. You know what I mean? This is not life. They have stolen our lives from us. It doesn't have to be like this. But as I've said a couple of times already, solutions are not going to come from the top down. Those 1% of the top, they love it the way things are. They are very happy with things. It is up to us to find grassroots way of making that irrelevant, you know. Start purifying your own water, grow some of your own vegetables. Make sure when you buy meat, if you must eat meat, make sure when you buy meat that it is coming from a farm where they look after their animals. You know what I mean? Don't buy into the whole mass production thing. Do what you can. Everybody can do something. Most people can't do everything, but everybody can do something. So figure out what you can do and start doing it now. Sorry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this, and I need inspiration. I need examples. I know there's a city in India where the government chips in a little bit, but the whole city is actually keeping themselves going.
And the money doesn't leave the city, right? Money circulates within the city.
they
Have you heard of
create their
Bristol
own
Pounds? They've done something here like that in Bristol.
Bristol.
Bristol Pounds, yeah. It's a scheme for a local currency. You can buy Bristol Pounds for real pounds. They're worth the same as real pounds, but Bristol Pounds can only be spent in Bristol, and so it keeps money generated by the local economy in the local economy. It doesn't go out to the big corporations. You know what I mean? Correct.
Okay.
That's another step on the road. I mean, that's another possibility as a transitional step, is that, you know, anyone can start a currency, do you know what I mean? And it can be accepted on whatever terms that currency is accepted on. It can be used as a way to raise finance to start a particular project, and when the project is complete, then the currency dies because it's done its job, do you see what I mean? And so you have hundreds of currencies all running at the same time, popping in and out of existence, being created, being destroyed all the time. And, you know, there's equivalency between them. It's a complicated but actually really beautiful, elegant idea. It completely turns the idea of money on its head. It makes it work for us instead of us working for it.
What do you think about universal basic income?
I think it's an excellent idea for a transitional step. Remove people from slavery, right? It takes people out of slavery immediately, and I think that's going to be a good thing.
Don't we get, like, if we have universal basic income, don't we get become slaves to that universal income, and the one that control the
I mean, they're doing some studies on it right now. There's two schools of thought on this, and until you try it, you never really know. One school of thought is that if you just give people the means to live and they don't have to do anything in exchange for it, they'll just sit around stroking their penises all day long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But like,
one thing on that.
if they can control the amount of it, so like it will just be.
It's a basic income, right? It's a basic income. It provides you with the basics, the essentials. Right? That's all. Not a luxury lifestyle, right?
Oh,
a
yeah,
basic, so you don't have to work to get food and shelter and heating. You know what I mean? But you are still free to work and go out there and earn money. But you don't lose your income if you start earning money. This is the thing. It's not like a benefit that you lose when you start earning. It's everybody gets it. However rich or poor you are, everybody gets it. Universal basic income, right? The other school of thought is that if you free people from having to go to shit jobs every day, you know, for £6 an hour or whatever, and having to work 50-hour weeks just to pay the rent, if you free people from that, then they will start just doing other things. They will start coming up with other ways to occupy their time, and they will start creating blogs, music, pictures, you know, inventions, whatever. You know, you now free people up to follow things that they actually want to do. A very wise man once said, if you have to pay money to someone to do something, the job probably wasn't worth doing in the first place. Yeah. So you know, I think that's a.
And they try it right now, 2017.
Yeah, they're trying it in Finland, they're trying it in Scotland, and they're trying it somewhere in Africa as well.
How many people work with money? I don't really want to make this a religious discussion.
Yeah, please don't.
But,
I mean, that's even worse than money as a control mechanism for society.
It's a valid, well, it's a thought, right? And I want to hear your view on this as well. I agree with you in terms of money equals debt. There's a, you know, money to some extent, right?
No, it's not a question of agreement, right? It is how it is.
Interest does play a big part because interest does make the poor poorer, right? And it only benefits the rich. I agree to that to an extent. In Islam, how would you say your view is quite different to Islam, where Islam forbids interest and usury, and
so did Christianity for many hundreds of years,
and promotes financing and trade away from interest, which is somewhat what you're trying to say.
Yeah, as a transitional step, but I really do believe long term we have to get away from the whole thing of money and profit altogether, and we have to learn how to just collaborate. Do you know what I mean? Just help each other out.
Similar to like the Islamic views in financing and trade, where you ban interest and usury.
Yeah, as a first step, banning interest, banning debt-based money, banning usury and debt-based money. Yeah, I think that would be an excellent. Yeah, but again, I'd stress again, long term, that's just a transitional step in the long-term goal of getting away from money altogether. Yeah, I really believe that has to be sustainability-wise, long-term good of humankind-wise.
So money also plays a role in rewarding people for their efforts, right?
Yeah, but what about different rewards?
What's the substitute to that? Give me the substitute.
Have you? Okay, let me try something out if you can afford it. Next time you walk past a homeless guy, no, it's fine. I'm just saying, next time you walk past a homeless guy that moves you in some way that you like the look of, whatever. You know, sometimes you just feel a kinship with someone. Yeah. Instead of giving him a pound or two, give him a £20 note and experience the look on his face. That's why. That's your motivation, right? Because you've made someone else's life better by doing something for them, by giving your labour, by helping them out, by giving them an idea, whatever. You've made someone else's life better. That feels good. It feels a lot better than £1,000 in the bank. Honestly, it really, really does. And until people get their mindset away from, I must be rewarded with money.
The funny thing is, you use the money. You could have said, buy them dinner or lunch.
Yeah, because no, but I'm saying they're used to getting a burger, they're used to getting a pound, yeah? If you give them something... For a homeless person right now, the best thing you can give them is money, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. And listen, I know it's not helping them long term, I get that, but you know what, today they've had a good day, do you know what I mean? But I can't help them long term, you know what I mean? That's the best. I mean, I suppose I could take it, you know, give them a room in my house sort of thing. I suppose I could do that.
Oh, it's my father's house. Even between sandwiches or whatever.
Yeah. But you know what? I'm not judging. If he wants to go and spend it on drugs, he go and spend it on drugs. I'm not fucking judging the guy, you know.
But your 13 pence worth of heroin that you'd buy from somebody in Afghanistan, by the time it gets to this country, is worth 300 quid. So, if it was completely legal and transported but wholesale by government or whatever, then for 13 pence you can walk into your shop and you buy your heroin fix. Hey man, if you got into a really bad habit, it might cost you 26 pence. Yeah? Yeah, so if you go
Instead of 300 quid, 600 quid, 900 quid. Yeah? So people are spending a vast amount on drugs in the illegal black market are generating a system where criminality has to occur. Because there's no way anybody can afford those prices. So we have an awful lot of crime that's related to something which, if it was perfectly legal and it was only illegal to profit on it, yeah? If you're going to sell alcohol and sell tobacco, you should sell drugs at the same time.
The first step.
Yeah? But you shouldn't be allowed to profit on them.
People can
And
decide.
by not profiting on them, we can actually wipe out the black market with all of the crime.
Liberate Mankind is my YouTube
So it's something to consider that our legal system helps support a system that helps fund the debt. It's kind of a bit scary. But we need to break out of it. We need to find out a way of saying
you will start losing up
that's our history
and that's like the first
and make
step.
it into our
When you
history.
have enough time, you can
The moment
actually
we-
start thinking about what you really
Like I say, we're scared
And then when
of the
money-
unknown.
when money
We're
becomes
comfortable
really
with what
hard,
we know. So all of history we know.
I think most people would agree with it, right?
We know
Not
history.
agree with it, right?
We don't know the future. So we educate our children to make our history for us.
Correct.
Because we're comfortable with
I
that.
love that. I'm going to
As
steal
long as
that phrase.
our children will make a history for us,
We've been
we can step into our history. So we keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again because we want to repeat the comfortable place to be in. We don't want to step into the
You know what?
future.
You've got to keep doing it. You've got to keep doing it. People hear the same thing again and again, and maybe somebody
To
else
give of
thinks
ourselves
the same
freely.
thing, and then it starts to flow in, yeah?
Give of ourselves freely.
Little things, yeah.
they say that, well, because of the research in Western our parents or we actually got the GPS.
It's going to be peaceful.
Navigation.
Change is going to be
We
peaceful.
also got
Look, if we change the way that we live, because at the moment we claim the ownership over this whole planet, say it's ours, if we can learn to give the planet back to all of life, say it was never ours in the first place, we made a terrible mistake a long time ago, and since then we've been, as it were, living in sin, because we've been taking something that wasn't ours and using it to the detriment of all of life. If we can stop doing that, and we can